Hey guys, Mike Brennan coming at you. We have a lot of ground to cover. So every Sunday, or no, I'm sorry, every Sunday, the first Saturday of every month, we cover what's been going on in the real estate community, in the financial community, anything new that's coming out that's happening. I have a whole ton of things to cover. Austin's going to be joining us in just a few minutes. I actually have to send him the invite, so I'm going to email him that right now before I forget, and then we're just going to start diving right in. Please, everyone, throw all of your questions in the chat. I would love to answer anything that is on your mind going on in the real estate community, financial community, and more. All right, there we go. Good stuff. All right, first thing I want to start out with is what the heck is going on financially, especially with the jobs market or the jobs report, because that is going to be what's going to be key to the end of the month. That and the inflation report, which has not come out yet, but we're anticipating that to be coming out on Wednesday. So one thing that we saw, if you haven't seen the news, one thing that we saw in the jobs report this time is we actually took a step back from the jobs growth that we have had in the last 12 months running. Okay, so over the last 12 months, we've seen job growth in excess of 400,000 jobs per month. Even last month, we saw a 500,000 job report growth, which is huge. And so far, that's given Jerome Powell on the Fed chair, has given Jerome Powell a lot of leeway to be able to raise interest rates and raise them super fast to try to combat inflation. Because during that same time, so we saw the jobs growth happening. We also saw, which is I'm sure not news to anybody, but we saw inflation just running rampant as high as 9.1%. Now in the eights. Starting to take a little bit of a step back, but not a huge step back. There's a couple of reasons for that, even though we see gas prices coming down, but into the eights. But is given Jerome Powell a lot of latitude with the interest rates to raise interest rates month over month over month over month. Okay, so here's what this looks like, and then I'm going to take it back just a little bit, right? So during the pandemic, two things happened. One, our government literally, and this isn't a referendum on the government. This isn't a right thing or a left thing. This isn't a political thing. These are just facts of what happened. Both presidents actually contributed to this, right? So the government literally just kind of turned on the printing presses and put trillions of dollars into the economy that did not actually exist before. Those were not tax dollars that were brought in and banked that were used for emergency purposes. It was the printing press being turned on. The effect of this was supposed to be to save our economy from what could have been the worst recession ever, literally ever, because of the COVID shutdowns, right? That happened across the US and further across the world. What actually ended up happening instead was we went into and got out of the lockdowns and the effects of COVID much, much faster than anybody anticipated. And as we're seeing now starting to come out, the government may have gone a little overboard with pumping dollars into the economy. I'm not saying it's a good thing, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying this is what's happened, causing rampant inflation. Because as soon as we started getting back to work as Americans, we really started getting back to work, right? American companies started taking off because demand was so pent up on a lot of things, including travel and leisure, right? I mean, if you go to restaurants nowadays, they are absolutely packed, as you could probably tell. Whenever I eat out, the lines are even longer than they were before, and there's less staff than there was before. So let's unpack that a little bit. With these jobs reports being so strong, it's indicated that our economy is strong enough to withstand high interest rates, right? Higher than we've seen over the last 7 or 8 years. And what that kind of means, what it kind of happens on the other end is the interest rates have been going up because Powell believes, and I think rightly so, Powell believes that we can curb inflation by raising interest rates. Because what ends up happening is the brakes go on the economy the higher the interest rate. The interest rates are one of those levers. And dating all the way back to like an Alan Greenspan, he used this quite a bit. He used that lever quite a bit to push and pull and tug the economy. It's one of those levers that can be used to either help an economy speed up by lowering interest rates, which is what happened during COVID and then previous to, or slow it down and put the brakes on and brakes on demand, right? So here's what this looks like in practical application. When interest rates go up as they have, it costs more to, let's say, lease or purchase a new car with a car loan. Simple enough. It costs more to go buy a new home. It costs more to go to Home Depot and have them come out and do your HVAC system. It costs more to do a kitchen on credit, right? That's how it impacts us as consumers. How it impacts business on a wider scale is, there we go. How it impacts business on a wider scale, put a point on this, is General Motors, when they go and they build a new plant because they're working very hard, and Ford is working very hard to go as close to electric as possible, as fast as possible. When they're building that new plant, let's take that Hummer plant that they just kind of revamped in Detroit, adding 800 jobs to the economy locally, which is great. General Motors doesn't write the check for that. They go and they borrow the money from the bank. At a 2% or a 3% business loan, it's a good bet. They don't need to win big to make it in the green, not the red, as far as that truck goes, as far as effectiveness goes. At a 5 or 6 or a 7% interest rate, as far as borrowing the money to go and rebuild that plant, that $80 billion, General Motors might look at that and say, you know what, this may not be a safe bet because the overall cost of the loan will exceed the payouts of the sales of the trucks, thereby slowing down the economy because those 800 people won't be employed that work at the plant. The 2,000 people rebuilding the plant won't be employed. And then those trucks that are out on the lot, those salespeople won't be able to sell them, and so on and so forth. And the ripple effect goes throughout the economy. So up till now, Jerome's been very big on trying to slow down that overheating of the economy and slow down that inflation rate. Hey, Austin, how you doing?
Man, I'm excited to be here. The speaking of the economy, Mike,
Yeah.
my assumption is you're talking about interest rates.
Yeah, we're talking about interest rates and job reports so far.
Yeah. So we were just at the dollar store. And by the way, if you've ever spent time with almost 5, he'll be 5 in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
A 5-year-old in a dollar store, like it takes a little longer than you think. And I don't know if you know this, but they raised the prices to $1.25. So
I saw that. I saw that back in June. I saw those articles coming out. Yeah. Yeah. So Dollar
here
Tree
it
is not
is. It's
Dollar Tree,
everywhere.
it's $1.25 tree. Yep.
Yeah, $1.25 treat. Ace calls it the money store.
The money store. The money store. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. So in essence, we were talking about the jobs report just a little bit. 2 points I want to put on there. Actually 3 points I want to put on there. The first one is, the jobs report this month came out just over 300,000, which is pretty much as expected, right? I mean, it's within 15,000 in line of what the expectations were. That is going to give Jerome Powell on the 27th of this month the latitude to raise the basis points another 0.75%. It's going to happen. Guys, it's going to happen. Now, if you read deep into the jobs report, you're also going to see that wage growth was only up 0.3%. However, I believe that we're going to see that over the next quarter go up a lot faster. A lot faster. There have been a couple of articles out there. You may have seen them in the Wall Street Journal, the Morning Brew, the New York Times, a couple of the other ones saying that 15 is the new 20. And I kind of put that in the comments that we'd be talking about that. So up until this point, it's been fairly standard for, and Costco started this about 8 or 9 years ago where they made $15 an hour, that the actual standard. And then a lot of places around it, like your Kroger's, your Targets, were really starting people out closer to 12. And then you've got over the last 5 years, even McDonald's and Burger King and Taco Bell and those places adopting that $15 an hour kind of a standard pay, right? But 15 is becoming the new 20. So more and more, a significant percentage of fast food, and then also the restaurants are raising wages. Fast food to $20 an hour. Restaurants are giving big bonuses right now. Here in Michigan, $2.65 was kind of the average that a server or a bartender would make. At least back in my day, they did. And now they're paying upwards of $6 an hour or even $7 an hour plus tips, which is huge. It's a significant difference to get the people just even in the door to apply for the jobs. Yeah. So what I do think we're going to see is we're going to see wage growth, even though it's 0.3% right now, we're going to see it a little bit closer to 1.5% to 2% in the last quarter of the year. And part of the reason why I see that is because stores are going to want to stay open later during Christmas times, Target, the malls, all of those things. And, if you go down Main Street, any of these stores right now that are not mall specific, and there's a reason why mall specifics are not included in this, but if you go down Main Street, a lot of these shops are still closing hours early. They're still taking days off, right? Like the Little Caesars right by my house in Royal Oak, they're not open Mondays or Tuesdays. The Maury, one of my favorite restaurants, they're only open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday because they can't get the staff in on the cook side or the waitstaff side to be committed to a 7-day-a-week open, right? The only reason why this hasn't affected the mall so hard is because those are, generally speaking, nationally sized bigger stores, not your mom and pop shops like, let's say, the Maury or like an individual store owner for Little Caesars. And malls have specific requirements that, hey, if you're going to be in this mall, you have to commit to opening at this time and not closing until this time. And there's some pretty hefty fines involved with those leases. Yeah, and the fines are actually in excess of paying people more, which is why if you go by the Williams Sonoma store, you go by the Pottery Barn or Nordstrom, they've already raised their wages upwards of $20 or $21 an hour.
Are they up that high?
Yeah,
That's interesting.
it's really interesting. It's really interesting where we're going with all this right now.
I love it.
What
What
do you
else
think?
is on your mind, by the way? So interest rates.
Interest rates, the inflation report, which I'm really curious what that's going to show on Wednesday. Gotta be honest, Austin. I think this was going to be a crapshoot. I mean, we saw 8.5% the last time out. We saw 9.1 the time before. I think we might see the sevens.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I think when it comes down to it, like energy cost does not play a big factor in the jobs report. When considering, um, how much people pay on a monthly basis in either rent or mortgage does, right?
Yeah.
How much people pay on a monthly basis as far as car loan does, right? How much they're paying at the grocery store does, right?
Yeah.
Things play a very, very large role in the inflation report. The gas at the pump actually doesn't, right? And not that it's not expensive, it just doesn't play a big role. So one thing we've seen for almost 100 days now, gas prices come down in a row, which is great. I mean, if you look at the pumps today versus a month ago versus Memorial Day before that, Memorial Day looks a lot different this year than Labor Day. Price at the pumps, which is great, which is awesome. But I don't think it's going to be enough to get that report deep into the sevens. And I'm talking like it's got to be like a 7.2 or a 7.3, I think, for Jerome Powell to consider not raising rates on the 27th of this month.
Yeah.
Like anything above a 7.2, rates are going up. And it's probably going to be, in my guess, is going to be 7.7 or 7.8%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a really interesting conversation, and I don't know who it was with. It was a couple of weeks ago, and somebody that's in the logistics business. And what's interesting is they're responsible for a massive spend. They're responsible for. Were you and I having this talk?
Maybe.
Maybe. They're responsible for they buy $24 million of fuel at a time. Right. So they work for a logistics company. And when you look at the infrastructure of trucking and how things get across the country, what ends up happening is you've got these like dispatch companies that pick up the jobs and then they hire out the individual owner operators. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can either work for a company in the trucking business or you can own your own truck. And what's interesting is one of the challenges that they continue to run into is around fuel costs. And so what you'll find is these dispatch companies, these logistic companies will put out a bid and say, hey, look, take this truck full of Slinkies to Nashville, Tennessee, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And so they'll bid it out, and there's a whole computer system. And what's wild is it's like a race to the bottom. And so a lot of truckers, because of fuel costs, are choosing to just sit at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's a race to the bottom because there's always someone that's willing to load up because they got a bunch of fixed expenses. If you own your own truck, you've got a bunch of fixed expenses. And so you'll load up a truck of Slinkies and drive it down to Nashville. And some of these guys are doing it for like $200 round trip profit or like break even profit just because they have to make sure that they hit their. And so the person that I was talking to, they said, hey, look, what's going to end up happening with fuel costs is if we don't see a decline in that, you like at some point, you're going to have all these people that are just sitting on the sidelines. And at some point, things are going to have to raise prices, obviously. And so we actually haven't even seen an increase in transportation costs the way we should. Now, that's a very micro specific part of our economy. But you got to think like everything that you buy, every single book on my bookshelf, every shirt came on a truck in America. I mean, it might have come across. It might have come across overseas on a boat, or it might have come across on a train, or it might have come across on a boat. But eventually, everything hits a truck. Everything, right? And so, from an inflation standpoint, this person, again, it's very micro. But the person that I was talking to, who's in that business, was going, "Hey, look, you're actually going to see an increase in this."
Yeah.
And they actually thought, and I said, "Well, okay, well, when do you think that'll be?" And they said, "Well, if we don't see lower fuel costs, then we may actually end up seeing that hit Christmas time." The other interesting thing about that business, Mike, is I don't know if you know this, but gas prices spike about right now and a little bit earlier. They spike in July.
They always
They
do
actually, over the
every year.
course of the winter, they actually come down.
They do. They do. And a
Yeah.
lot of that has to do with simply put, in the northern states, as soon as the sun comes out, as soon as the kids are out of school, families get on the road. Literally. They head up to Traverse City, they head out to Chicago, they head down south, they head out east, they head out west.
Yeah.
I mean, our fuel, the amount of fuel used in the United States goes up 18 to 22% per year over those 3.5 summer months. It's crazy.
Not only does the amount of fuel that we use go up, but they have evaporation costs that don't exist in November.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about
And
that as
so,
well.
and so there's certain additives that you have to put to the fuel and all this stuff. I don't know. Listen, if you're a fuel expert, chime in and tell me I'm an idiot. I don't, but as I was talking to this person, as I understand it, like, so we've actually I imagine, hopefully, Mike, I mean, who knows with all the, like, Russia's impacting all this stuff and energy costs and whatnot, but I imagine we'll see kind of a peel back in fuel. So it'll be really interesting. Like, are the added transportation costs going to start hitting us, or are we going to start peeling back because energy costs are going to come down? And I pray to God that energy costs come down over the winter anyway. It's like trying to heat your home in the winter. It starts to hit people's pocketbooks, obviously, pretty hard.
Well, and I think we're going to see that happen pretty well over the winter in the United States.
Yeah.
I think Europe is going to be a whole different kit and caboodle, right? So, and here's what I mean by that. So in the United States, we are actually fairly self-sufficient with our own oil reserve, with our own oil pumps and our own oil supplies, which is great. In Europe, 40% of their energy is pumped in directly from Russia, right? And we're seeing that with I forgot the name of it, the Nordic one or the Cord or whatever that pipeline is. Where the pipeline is that they shut down for quote unquote maintenance for 3 days. We're seeing that have actually a heavy effect. I'm in England right now, and we're seeing that have a heavy effect and actually make national news here, where, you know, it makes news in the United States, but not a ton of news because we're more of an exporter of oil than an importer. We're a net exporter of oil, right? Versus Europe, which is a net importer of both oil, but more importantly, even natural gas going into winter, which is going to become a very large issue for Europe very quickly here, right? Because of the war that's going on in Ukraine and the tensions that have been high, the economic instability, all of that included, right? For us in the United States, finally, August 11th, we broke that $4 a gallon barrier, which is great, down over $1 from before on August 11th, and has been trailing down slightly every day since, which is good. Here's where I think this is going to really help people out, right? So of course, as the fuel costs come down, life gets a lot easier in other ways, and they can go spend the money in other areas. Here's what I'm afraid of, and here's the point I'm going to get to.
Yeah.
When costs go down on things, I see a lot of people in life forget that there are deals out there, even on lower cost things.
Huh.
So, as an example, when gas in May was $5.20 a gallon, right? When it was $5.20 a gallon, you and me and everybody down the street, we started looking at either Costco or Kroger Points, or we started looking at, you know, like I've got the Gas Buddy app, which I also haven't opened in a month and a half now. The gas price has been coming down. And literally, like I would leave my house and I would plan my route based on which pump was the least expensive, right? Because by me, the Costco is actually out of the way versus on the way to things, which is a shame. I want to just kind of implore everybody, hey guys, you know, we are not out of the woods as far as inflation goes, right? I mean, if you look at just the cost of the different proteins out there, turkey, bacon, beef, chicken, those are all up between 15 and 30%. And I think they're going to continue to go up, not down. So even little things like getting a Costco membership if you don't have one, especially if you can get one of the executive ones, not plugging Costco for any other reason than they have the cheapest gas out there. They are routinely 20 to 30 cents lower per gallon than a Speedway, let's say. And again, I'm not trying to knock Speedway. I like Speedway. I go to Speedway. There's one right next to my house that I frequent. But again, 20 cents a gallon is 20 cents a gallon.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, we all got fuel tanks in the 12 to 20 gallon range. Let's call it 15 gallons. That's $3 a fill. If you got to fill once a week, dude, that's $150 a year just by switching to Costco gas. Going to Kroger, well, guess what? We're doing grocery shopping anyway. You know, I've got my Kroger card. I was able to get something like, I think it was like 18 cents off per gallon the last time I went to Kroger because of all the points that I had saved up. Not to mention you get less on food and stuff like that. So my point there is, yes, prices are coming down on gas, which is good. However, I think that prices are going to continue to go up in other areas. Restaurants are charging more than they had before.
Yeah.
And when I say more, let me quantify that. From the month before that, there was an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal recently. From the month before the pandemic to July, the average meal prices increased 60% at a restaurant.
60?
60.
Huh.
The food costs are up, the labor costs are up, and there's nowhere to go but put it on the consumer. I mean, look at something like a DoorDash or even an Uber Eats. Like that plays into this. Like DoorDash and Uber Eats routinely charge restaurants 40% convenience fee. Right? That's 40% that they would get if you were eating in the restaurant. That's 40% that they would get if you stopped and picked it up. That's 40% they got to pay Uber Eats and they got to pay DoorDash that the restaurants don't get. Most restaurants tend to go negative. Most restaurants go negative on the food that they provide through those two services, but they also have to provide those. You can Google Uber Eats and DoorDash caps in New York City. New York City started putting caps on it of 30 or 35 cents, depending on what district it's in, because they felt that it was being too egregious to businesses, to put businesses out of business, essentially,
Yeah.
especially in the pandemic. Like a lot of these businesses, they had to at least keep their names out there and they wanted to keep their employees employed. So they were willing to go negative with government assistance. They could go negative. But that government assistance is done. That government assistance is done. So they've had no choice over the last 18 months, but just continue to raise prices.
Which price? Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you, Austin, I went out to eat the other day at a restaurant that I really like and I go to year after year. It used to be a routinely $80 bill. It was $145. It actually caused me to go back and reread that article because I was like, holy heck, this is an actual real thing.
Well, it's a good thing you got Costco gas because you can go out twice now with those meals with the money that you saved with the Costco gas.
And that's it. And that's it. That's all. Actually, I can only go
Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah. But point being, guys, pick up the pennies wherever you can. Be more frugal than you have before. Take a little extra time in the week and pre-plan out where you're going to do your purchases. So the last minute stuff at the convenience stores and the 7-Elevens, because all of those costs are always, I mean, they were jacked before. Like a gallon of milk at a 7-Eleven is not the same price as Kroger. We know this.
Yeah.
And that's why they call them convenience stores, because it's convenient to run in, grab the gallon and go. But every convenience in life you have to pay for.
Yeah.
Right? That's how that works. Again, not trying to like overstep and tell people what to do, but trying to save people money. I do
I
believe
think it's sound advice. It's like when you think it's like you got to tighten up. It's fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes we all do it. Sometimes we go a little wild with the spending, and you got to tighten it back up.
Yeah. And anytime prices go down, especially 20 or 30 or 40% on something like it has with gas is down over 20% in the last 100 days. I see people loosen up the reins on how well they're trying to control that cost because it's less, right? Like, oh my gosh, like I was happy at Costco at $4.79 when everywhere else was $4.99, but now everything's at $3.89 or $3.79. It doesn't really matter. I won't drive that. I won't drive the extra, 5 minutes out of my way to save 20 cents anymore.
Yeah.
When the answer should be, I think, yeah, go ahead and drive the 5 minutes, right? There are only 3 ways that Americans really can make more money. Right? And that's pay less taxes, take advantage of every tax write-off possible. And if you have kids, make sure you are. If you have a mortgage, make sure you are. If you have those things that the government provides deductions for, make sure you are. Work harder to make more money or pay less for the things that you use. That's it. And somewhere in the intersection of those 3 is where we got to live as Americans right now. It's just where we are. It's just where we are. Yeah. The other thing I think that's happening that's causing gas prices to come down a little faster than what was anticipated is, and it didn't make as big of a news as I thought that it would have, but the 3 major oil companies that process and provide gas in the United States posted their biggest quarterly earning report, or biggest quarterly profit reports that they had ever posted in their respective 90-year histories. So what I see is a lot of these companies are inflating costs. It's not just gas, but let's just use gas for the example, right? So if you've got like an ExxonMobil, like Exxon is inflating the cost to consumers, and they're calling it inflation in Q1 of the year, and then they're still saying it out in the news in Q2. But then all of a sudden Q3 hits, and the Q2 earnings report comes out, then we're all like, whoa, bro. You just doubled and a half your profits off the same quarter last year.
Right.
Are your costs really up, or did only my costs go up?
Now, I also empathize with those guys. Like when you're in the oil business on that scale, you're playing
I don't.
years in advance. It's like, so you've
No,
got
no,
to.
no, sure, sure. I don't. I don't emphasize.
But
I don't.
I don't.
Here's
Maybe empathize is the wrong
yeah.
word.
Here's the reason why. Here's the reason why I don't. And here's the reason why I don't.
Yeah.
Two of the CEOs have been on a couple of the news channels. You can Google this stuff. All the videos are out there. And one of them just came out and literally said, "Hey, if the government asked me to produce more oil to get the gas price down, I'd say no. My job is to protect my shareholders, not the American public."
That's a good point.
And it is. I mean, and that's capitalism. That's the way that this works, right?
Yes.
And the way capitalism works can sometimes be very good and sometimes can be very bad. It just depends on how many players are in the game, if there's a monopoly, if there's not, if we're beholden to them, if we're not. There's a whole different, myriad of things to look at. And I gotta admit, as an American, I'm a little mad at the gas companies for taking this COVID situation, this supply chain situation, these rising costs, and then using that to parlay themselves into the biggest profitable quarter they've ever had, on the backs of people like myself and yourself and everybody that's watching the Zoom, having to go back to the gas pumps and pay 30% more than we did a year ago.
Yeah.
I'm actually irritated at that. Just being honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eh,
I understand it. I get why they did it. I get the way why they can get away with it, because we're just gonna keep on buying the gas anyway.
there's nothing you can do. Yeah.
No, it doesn't help these guys go increase their gas supply by 20%, because all that means is that the gas has got to come down in price.
Until Ford really gets this electric F-150 going.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a whole nother thing, right? So now we've got, the state of California coming out and saying, okay, we're gonna stop selling. We're gonna stop allowing the sale. That's what it is. Stop allowing the sale of new gas vehicles by 2035.
Yeah.
Did you see that the other day? That law that got passed?
2035, they won't allow the sale of all gas
Mhm.
vehicles. You
Yep,
have to have at least hybrid.
Nope, it has to be electric.
All electric?
100% electric.
Really?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then Oregon and Washington State are expected to follow suit before the end of the year. So that just went to the governor's desk to sign. It's expected he's going to sign it if he hasn't already. I've been out of the United States for a couple of days, so I've been out of the news. But here's what the interesting thing about this is. That one thing, California is going to speed up the adoption of electric vehicles. Do you know why?
Huh.
If you separate California out from the United States, it's the 5th biggest economy in the world.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Literally, the California economy is the 5th biggest in the world. Pile on Oregon, pile on Washington State. It's expected that Idaho and Utah will follow suit directly after that by middle of next year. All of a sudden, you've got that tipping point event that Malcolm Gladwell talks about, where enough people have jumped on that bandwagon that by 2030, 2032, 2035, we're going to see a lot more across the, not just across the United States, but across the world. We're going to see a lot more governments start piling on that bandwagon.
As I understand it, it's not actually very high. Like when you look at the European tipping point, it was like 5% saturation. And I think
Yeah.
we just crossed it here in America.
Yeah. Well, and there are certain countries where like I think Finland's up above. I think they just hit 40% EV sales over the last rolling 12 months. Like
Yeah.
it's a big number in some of these other smaller countries where there have been some massive incentives for adoption. In our country, that hasn't been yet. I will say this. With this renewable energy plan, or whatever the Inflation Reduction Act is what they're calling it. I want everybody on this call to be careful if you're considering an EV, because the tax credit has changed. Okay. So the tax credit before was you got a $7,500 tax credit for any EV that you bought, right? Any electric vehicle. So if you bought an EV, if you bought a Tesla at 40,000, you effectively pay 32,500 because you got 7,500 back on your taxes, right? And guys, it's a tax credit, not a tax write-off. So it's not that you get to reduce your income like a write-off at 7,500. So you only really get like 2,500 back, like you do with like mortgage interest. That's a write-off. So if I pay $1,000 to the mortgage company in interest, I effectively get $300 knocked off my taxes. This is a tax credit. So it's a $7,500 credit, not write-off. So you will get $7,500 back on your taxes, making the effective price of that car $32,500. But here's the caveat is, previous to this, the tax credit was any electric vehicle. Okay. Now it's only on electric vehicles that are assembled, and I forgot the percentages, but a percentage of the parts have to come from the United States, which also means at this moment, almost none of them qualify.
What percentage of the parts?
I don't remember what it was. I
Huh.
don't know. It was high enough that I believe there were only 2 vehicles that currently qualify, like
Huh.
1 GM and 1 Tesla, and that's it. And that's where Ford and GM and Chrysler, they're all now scrambling to move some of the manufacturing back to the US and make sure the assembly is happening inside the US because they want to be sure that their cars qualify for the tax credit. Because otherwise, they're going to have to reduce their price 7,500 to compete with the ones that do.
Yeah.
Right? So if you've got a $40,000 Chevy Cruze and you've got a $40,000 Tesla, I mean, frankly, the Tesla's the hotter, sexier vehicle anyway. Let's just be honest with that. But let's
Yeah.
just say you're comparing those 2 vehicles. I'm a GM guy, so I would look at the Chevy Cruze and I'd say, yes, if the prices are the same, I'd probably go Chevy Cruze because my loyalty is the GM. They fed me and clothed me growing up. They employed my father. They employed my family. They employed a lot of my family members. I have never driven anything except a GM product, and I probably won't ever drive anything except a GM product. But now, well, that Tesla's not 40,000. It's actually 32.5.
Yeah. Interesting.
And that Chevy Cruze is still 40,000. And for regular folk like you and me and everybody that's watching this right now, that $7,500 is a lot of money.
A lot of money.
$600 a month for a year.
Yeah.
More than that.
Over the course of even a normal loan, it's probably $100 a month. Yeah.
Yep. So now GM has 2 options. They can either move the manufacturing over, make sure that and the Cruze is actually, if I remember right, it's assembled in Canada, move the assembly plant back into Ohio where it was originally, or reduce the price to make it competitive, which means they're not making any money on the car.
Yeah.
Cars aren't cheap to make. There's not on small cars. If there is any margin, it is extremely small, right? Like most of the small Chevys, for example, they usually go backwards $1,000 a car, right? But it's okay. You know, like back in the day, we had the Pontiac Sunfire. They went backwards 1,000 to 1,500 per car. But it was okay and it worked because it got young people into the GM family, and then they would eventually buy the Tahoe or they would buy some sort of a large vehicle where they make 15 or 20,000 per vehicle, or an
Yeah.
Escalade where they make 22,000 to 24,000 profit per vehicle. It made sense, right? Which is part of the reason why Saturn went out of business. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Saturn came out with a great car, greatly marketed towards safety, just like the Volvos and the Volkswagens out there. But then what happened? Like if you're out of college and you're starting a family and you want the safe vehicle and you want to drive American, what do you pick? You pick a Saturn, right? You remember that, Austin?
Oh yeah. Bulletproof vehicles.
Yeah.
Like
And
they had
then
the advertisement back in the day, you could slam a basketball into the side of the door and it wouldn't dent it. It was
it wouldn't dent it. Yeah.
yeah.
But then what happens when your family grows and you need a bigger vehicle? What do you buy next? A Volvo.
Yeah, sure.
Because Saturn didn't provide a bigger vehicle. So Saturn became a feeder for Volvo and Volkswagen. Volvo and Volkswagen actually did the smart thing is they figured out there you go, Ann. They figured out all the Saturn owners because data is available, readily available for everybody out there. Then they started marketing to Saturn owners of a specific age range,
Yeah.
which is brilliant, by the way.
Yeah.
Brilliant marketing, because why wouldn't you market?
Why wouldn't you?
If you know that these guys at some point in time, statistical probability is they're going to get married, they're going to have kid 1, they're going to have kid 2, they're going to need a bigger vehicle. Saturn doesn't provide it. They're not going to buy a Chevy or a Pontiac because they don't have the safety ratings. So they're going to go on to Volvo or Volkswagen.
Yeah. What else is on your mind, man?
Man, I got a lot on my mind. I always got a lot on my mind. There's a great question in the chat. We're going to get to you, Amy. Don't you worry. Stick with me for a minute. Shoot, I had one more thing I wanted to cover. Yeah. So we covered $15 an hour is the new 20. So again, expect everything to go up in price, more specifically around leisure activities, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that was the last thing I wanted to cover. So the Department of Transportation just came out with a website, and I will find it and I will get it into this chat somewhere. They just came out with a website that consumers can now go to complain when flights are delayed, canceled, moved over, lost luggage, and it explains to you in clear terms what you're entitled to, which is a first. So a lot of people don't know this. When your flights are canceled, you're of course entitled to a full refund. But if you're stuck somewhere, they can pay up to $2,500 per day to cover your hotel or your car rental or whatever it is. So if you've got to extend your hotel, if you got to extend your car rental, if something goes wrong in that fashion, The airlines actually have to pay that. But here's the thing. It's so convoluted as to how to find it. Nobody really claims it, right? And if you go on the TikToks and the YouTubes and the Instas and the Reels and the Shorts, you can see, some of these Instagrammers and some of these YouTubers talking about this, some of these TikTokers talking about this. But again, the process has been so convoluted that a very small percentage of people actually took advantage of this. Well, guess what? The government gave $68 billion in bailout money to Delta, American, United, Southwest during COVID to make sure those companies stayed afloat. And now they're really pissed off, and they are pissed off, that 550,000 flights have been canceled so far this year. Yeah, guys, that's a real number. How many people on this call have had flights literally delayed or canceled in the last 12 months?
I got stuck in New Orleans an extra couple of days. It was.
Hey, I know people that have gone to 3 different places, and 3 different times flights were either canceled or delayed.
Yeah.
Costing them money from work, costing them time, costing them stress and aggravation, especially if there are kids or families involved.
Yep.
I mean, literally, like if you got a horror story, put it in there. I'd love to hear it. And I will find that site, but there's a site now where you can go and actually put your complaint in to get your revenue or your money out, not revenue, but get your reimbursements out, and then get whatever it is that you're owed for having to like stack up extra fees out from the airlines. And the intention here from the government is to both make sure Americans are getting covered for this, but also make the airlines a little more accountable that, hey, if you say there's going to be a flight, make sure there's a flight.
Yeah.
That's the end result of what they really want. They don't necessarily want Delta to pay you $1,200 for the hotel and the stuff and the loss of work. They want Delta to actually have the flight. Yeah. Anyway, I think this is a good question. How would I go about buying a property, house, or duplex in my business name? What would I need to qualify? Austin, I've done this more than a few times. I have as well. I'd love you to kick this off because I'd like to hear how you do it, because I do it probably a little bit differently.
How do I buy a property in my business name?
Mm-hmm.
I buy the property in my name, and then I call my attorney and get it flipped into a business name.
Yep. And how does that work?
Well, they literally just do my attorney fills out a bunch of forms, and it's not particularly expensive. It's like they charge me, it's called a quick claim deed. They charge me, I don't know, $100, maybe $200 to do it. And they fill out a form, you file it. I have to make sure that I have a bank account set up. This is my rental properties, but I make sure I have a bank account set up for, with a separate, EIN number that you can get right from the state of Michigan. And they literally just quick claim deeded over into my name. Now the mortgage is still in my name.
Yep.
But so the idea behind this is like long term, I'll be able to finance things right out of that business entity. Right. But as it turns out, the majority of the time, financing it through your personal is far superior than getting a business loan or business loan anyway. So
agreed. But why do you put it in your business name? What's important about that? Amy, that's a great question, by the way. And
great question.
What's
a liability thing? So again, these are my rental properties. So like if I've got this one property, Mike, where the railing off the back porch probably isn't as high as it should be. It's technically to code, but all it takes is one tenant drinking too much and flipping over the side of it and breaking their arm, and I'm getting sued. But if it's in the business name, I remove my own personal liability because they technically could come after my own personal assets. And I don't want to look. What's crazy about assets, you guys, is you don't want them. You don't want them in your name because if you do anything, people can come after your personal assets. So like that's actually the purpose of a trust, is pull all the assets out of your personal name and actually give them over to the trust. And so it's you just got to protect your personal assets.
And one thing I'll say, and I love this follow-up question that Amy has, and guys, and thank you, Austin, for texting that to me. Here is the site here. I just put it in the chat boxes on wherever it is that you're watching, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're at right now. And by the way, if you haven't already, as a thank you for putting that link in there, thank you to Austin. Please subscribe to my YouTube. Sorry. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, Amy, that's a great question. So she's saying, I have an EIN, I just don't know how to go about getting the first property. One thing I'll say, and I want to make sure I put a pin on this one. To this point, is with the liability side of it. Like if I slip and fall, if I'm walking up the porch and I slip and fall on ice and I break my leg and I sue them, each property is in an individual EIN, not a group of properties in one EIN, in one business name, right? Because the most I can sue Austin for is for whatever it is that he owns in that one entity,
Yeah.
right? So not only is Austin protecting his family, his wife, his kids from me going after his personal bank accounts or his retirement funds or his own property that he lives in, but he's also protecting each property by siloing them from each other. Right. So again, let's say I go back and I want to sue Austin and I call him up and I'm like, hey man, guess what? Lawsuit coming down the pipe. I want to sue you for 100 grand for damages or whatever it is. And I go and I call an attorney and the attorney says, all right, let's look this guy up. Let's see what he's got. And he says, dude, guy owns, I don't know, 5 properties and, blah, 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 blah. Wait a minute. What address was that again? Oh, you can only sue him on this address. And by the way, looks like with the recorded mortgage, he's only got like 20% equity tops, maybe 30, maybe 50. But then there's also the cost of having him dilute the property to get the cash out if I do actually win the lawsuit. And by the time all is said and done, there's not a lot of money there. The attorney's going to look at it and say, you know what? Because I'm probably taking this case on a contingency, which means that the only way I get paid is I get paid about 30% of what you win, Mike.
Yeah.
I'm just not even going to take the case at all.
It's all right. Not going to take it.
Not going to take it because I got to make sure that I'm taking cases that allow me to feed my family. It's not a mean thing. It's not an argumentative thing. It's just when an attorney is working on contingency, they have to be careful which cases they choose because they can only spend the time once to make sure that their family gets fed.
Yeah.
Right. So again, putting them in each individual EIN number and making sure all those assets are properly separated out is extremely important. Great point, Amy. Now on buying the property, that's going to be a little bit different. So one of these things is going to be contingent on, there's 2 basic roads to go. Let me put it that way. And one is going to be contingent on, do you currently own a property?
Yeah.
Right. And one is going to be either, yes, I currently own a property. So that's going to take you down a different path, or no, I don't own a property, which is going to take you down a different path, or at least my advice will. Let me put it that way.
Let's assume that she doesn't own a property. Just take it there.
Okay. Let's assume that you do not own a property. Actually, that's funny because I did this when I was buying a property. I just did a video on this that will be posted on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. That'll be coming out this week. I think it'll be our 3rd video, so Friday. So when I was 20, I bought my first property. It was not, for a 20-year-old, most 20-year-olds are young and dumb. I was. I think I made like one good decision in my early 20s, and this was it. Right. I decided not to buy the flashy car. I decided to buy a property that was easily rentable.
Yeah.
Right. And by it being my first property, and I had to go FHA at the time because, again, I was 20 years old and I didn't have a lot of credit built up, but I had enough built to get that loan. I was able to do a 3.5% down, 3.5% down at that time, FHA loan.
Yeah.
Right. So minimal out of pocket. When I say minimal out of pocket, I also had the sellers pick up the closing costs. So that first property I bought was $135,000. Right. My total out of pocket was around $5,000. Right. Which is not no money. But when you're considering buying a rental property, that's highly leveraged. Right. Now, what I did was I followed the FHA guidelines. I lived in that property for the minimum requirement of 1 year. Okay. So that's what FHA requires you to do. You have to live in the property for 1 year. At that point, you can flip that into a rental property. You can sell it. You can do whatever the heck you want with it. So at 3.5% down, at $5,000 down, with the sellers covering those closing costs for me, I was able to then move out of that property, buy a second one, because my intention was to buy another primary residence for another 3.5% down. I got my second mortgage was also an FHA loan, right? And then that first one I moved out of, my total cost, because it was a condo, including the condo fees, the insurance, and the payment, was around $950 a month. I was able to rent it for $1,200 a month.
Yeah.
Wasn't making a hell of a lot of money. I wasn't like the world on fire, but I was making $350 or $250 a month in let's call it profit. Right? Plus, I was paying down the loan.
Yep. Somebody was paying the loan for you. Yeah.
Paying the loan for me. Yep. And the property was going up in value. Now, as it ended up happening, the property shot down in value in 2008. So the $130,000 condo became $25,000 real quick. So to continue kind of down that path, I had 2 choices at that point. I still owed around $90,000 on the condo at that moment. So the two decisions I had at that point was either short sell the condo and get out of it. But frankly, it was renting just fine. I didn't have a reason to do a short sale, or maybe do a dollar cost averaging and go buy one or two of those shit condos anyway.
Yep.
I didn't mean that. I didn't mean shit condos. I mean the prices were deflated. Put it that way. So I bought two more of those, right? So my dollar cost averaging brought the prices way down. Now those condos rent for $1,500 a month.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Yes.
that very first condo, I only owe $40,000 at this point. Yeah. Now, if you already own a property, that's a different set of events. And Austin, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah. Look, you've got a couple of different options. Like you've got, like if you own your own primary residence and you want to just go out and buy a rental property, it's like, well, you got to come up with 20% down to get a traditional loan. What's interesting is 25% gets you better terms if you can get you 25% down. So I'll say it a different way. Let's pretend you bought a $200,000 home. You would need $40,000 down payment, or you'd get better terms if you could come up with 50. And then you've got your closing costs and prepaids. And of course you could get the sellers to pay for that too.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can transfer it over to the business name. The other way that you can do things, and what's really interesting, Mike, is you're seeing the market soften for sellers. And again, we've gone from a hair on fire, pour gasoline on everything hot market to like a more normalized market. But sellers, like here, I actually even pulled some historical data on this. Like here, I'll share it with you.
Yeah. And Amy, I'll say this.
Yeah.
You know, and going to your comment about the duplex, and please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help you get into that duplex in Troy, or at least look at it and say, hey, you know, this may not be the best bet for you and your family and what you're looking to accomplish short term or long term for X, Y, and Z reason. Maybe a different investment might work better financially, right? Because not all investments are good investments. And like, I don't know about you, Austin, I'm sure that you've done the same thing where, you know, I've looked at probably 30 investment properties in the last 30 days, and I've rejected 29 of them.
Yep.
Literally made an offer on one because on the surface, when I'm online, when I'm in the multiple listing service, when I'm on Zillow, when I'm on realtor.com, everything's honey and roses and it makes sense. And then once I actually start doing the math really deep and looking at the numbers and looking at the property, what the property really needs, I'm like, you know what, this property didn't make sense, right? So only one of those actually hit right for me. Money-wise, we treat our clients the same way. We treat them like family. So if you bring us a property and you're like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? If it's not a good in your best interest, we're not going to put it in writing and say you should do this.
Yeah.
And also because investors tend to, investors tend to transact with us about a dozen times over the course of a 10-year relationship.
The relationship is huge to us. Yeah.
I'm not going to mess up a relationship for one check.
So if you look at the data here, like what this is, Amy, is it says like, okay, what was the original price of what a home listed for and what did it sell for? Okay. So October 2021, if something listed for 274.9, it sold for 275. Fast forward to November 2021. If it listed for 255, it sold for 277, 235, 265, 259, 241. And so what's interesting is recently, like last month, if it listed for 290, it still was selling for 300. In July, if it listed for 318, it sold for 309. But then this last month, like if something listed at 277, it sold for 260. And so, right, Mike was talking about at the beginning of this, like interest rates and that's hitting people's pocketbooks and it's softening things. You're seeing longer days on market. You're just seeing things slow down as far as, now again, this is still really good. Like what that means, Mike, if I take 260 into 277, like that means things are still selling at 94% of the original list price. Like if
it's still up there. Yeah.
Like if you went to go buy a new dress or a new whatever, and it was $100 marked down to $94, it wouldn't, you know what I mean? It wouldn't sway one way or another. So we're okay. It's not like it's oh my gosh, things are down 10% and 20%. It's just like it's a little bit of a softening. Part of that too is people have been trying to list their homes been a little bit greedy, right? They've been trying to
Mhm.
list their homes, and they're thinking, well, someone will just bring me an offer. Well, the buyers just start bringing an offer, and so as an investor, that creates a really cool opportunity for you. Like you could take a home that's maybe listed at, this is what I did recently. It's listed at $330,000 originally, and probably should have been listed at 300. And so they're
Yep.
not getting any showings or activity. And so it created an opportunity for me to come in and offer 280. Now, what? Everybody's okay.
Whoa.
Will I be able to get the 280? Like that's another ball game, but it just creates some opportunities. And so
Mhm.
another thing that you could do, Amy, and so on this particular offer, like I came in and offered land contract. And so instead of doing traditional financing, so right now, if you did an investment loan, like you went to your bank or you went to the mortgage company, we've got a great mortgage company, Silverline Lending, and you said, hey, I want to buy investment property. They'd say, okay, if you put 20% down, your interest rate's going to be 6.5. If you put 25% down, I can get you down to 6.25.
But here's the great thing. You're going to bypass all of that with your situation.
Yeah.
You're at 3.5% down, rate of the day, baby.
She doesn't own a property. Yeah, you go and
Doesn't
buy
own a
it and live
property.
in it for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with this duplex situation that you're looking at, which I think is, by the way, is very smart.
Yeah.
If I go back in time, I would probably do something very similar. I had done something similar for a hot moment in Hamtramck. One thing I want to make sure I caution you on is living next to your tenant. They know where you live. So that sucks. Just putting this out there into the world. So if it were me, I would say, yes, this is a great plan. It's a good 1 or a 2 year plan. And then you want to get out of that, go buy a third property. Well,
Yeah.
actually, it'd be a second property, buy a second property, and then turn both sides into a rental just for space and distance. That's my own opinion. I would never want to live next to my tenant, or at least shorten it up as short as possible. But here's the cool thing.
Yeah.
So FHA loans, you can go rate of the day, right? Whatever it is, which is around 5.5% right now. You can go rate of the day, or even as low as 5%. With the lowest down payment, the 3.5% down payment, right? Because it's still your primary residence, because you're looking to live in it for a minimum of 1 year.
Yeah.
And you can do that for an up to a 4-unit property. So your duplex qualifies.
Yep.
What's going to end up changing is your homesteaded versus non-homesteaded taxes. So I want to make sure I cover this ground a little bit. The state of Michigan thinks that if I'm rich enough to own 2 properties, it'll be gracious enough to charge me 40% more on the second property in taxes. Simple enough.
Hooray.
Duplexes are not exempt from this. They're just only partially exempt, right?
Yeah.
So if you're living in one side of the duplex, you will have a 50% homestead credit. The other 50% will be non-homesteaded. If you live in a triplex, it's a third, a third, a third. You'll have a 1/3 homestead credit. If you live in a quadplex and you live in one of them, it'll be a 25% homesteaded property. And we see these on the MLS. We see them on the multiple listing service.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at this property, that's one thing that we would consider is saying, hey, who is the current owner? Are they living in it? Do they have a homestead on it already? If not, your taxes might just go down just a little bit. I'm not talking a massive amount, but 15 or 20%. Which is always a good thing. We want to make sure at the closing, when you go to Troy, which is right over in Big Beaver, right next to 75 on Civic Drive, and you walk into the assessor's office, which is on the left, I've done this before at Troy, that you're filing properly, because if you misfile on a duplex, and this isn't just a Troy thing, this is any city, they will go after you for the max amount possible. Even if it's your fault, even if it's their fault, it doesn't matter. Right? So if you misfile the homestead paperwork, which I see a lot of owners of duplexes and triplexes do that, where they go for the full homestead credit. The city says no, but they don't tell you for 5 years that they said no. They just marked it no. So now you're paying an extra $1,000 a year in taxes, or $1,500 a year in taxes that you didn't have to pay for 6, 7, 8 years. I've seen that happen, right? They will not tell you if you check the wrong box, is what I'm saying. So we got to make sure we're super careful on that. Now, at the end of that year, at that moment, you've got 12 on-time payments on your credit history added on, which is great. Your credit strengthening. You've got, the lease that's been fulfilled for 12 months. So now you're becoming more of a seasoned investor in the mind of a mortgage company, aka the mortgage payment is at least 75% covered, which is nice. So now you can go and get that second loan without that first loan taking too much off your income. So the way that loans work are pretty simple. About 28% of your income you use towards your loan, your gross income, right? Now, let's say a full 28%, just for the sake of this example, a full 28% of your income is being used to pay for this duplex, right? You can negate 75% of what you're bringing in rents per month by showing a fulfilled 12-month lease agreement. Okay. So when you rent that property out, right, you have to do a 1-year written lease, let's say for $1,000 a month. And let's say your payment is $1,500, just for round numbers, just keeping the numbers easy. So at the end of the 12 months, you supply to the mortgage company, say, okay, I want to buy this other house. I want to get pre-approved. They're going to say, wait a minute, you got a $1,500 a month mortgage. You're pretty close to tapped out. So we can approve you for like a $600 a month mortgage, but not a $1,500. And you say, wait a minute, I've got this lease agreement and I've got 12 months of checks showing that I paid it on time. So that $1,000 a month lease that you're bringing in, they will give you credit for $750 per month. Okay. They assume a 25% vacancy rate, which if anybody out there, I mean, we got a couple dozen people on the line right now. I'm sure you're all laughing because vacancy rates are literally at 0 right now. Like zero, which is part of the reason why this is a good time to be an investor. So
you're not renting your house out right now. You're charging too much.
That's right. So now you've got that $600 a month that the mortgage company is saying that you can afford, add it to the $750, and that gets you back up to a $1,350 total payment.
Okay.
Now you can buy a house again. Now you can buy a house for $200 or $250 or $300 or whatever it is, depending on the down payment situation and other things. But at least get you something reasonable. So Amy, that's a great way to do it. That's a great way to start that wealth building journey, I think. And like myself, is that duplex that you're looking at the same thing as the house that I was looking at, where it wasn't the hot sexiness that was amazing, that was awesome, that was like the dream? No. But a year goes by in the flash of an eye, blink of an eye, right? If you can put the dream off for a year or 2 years or 3 years, you can wealth build your way into the dream and build a foundation of wealth for your family.
For sure.
I see a lot of people that they go after that house at 800,000 or $1 million. And it's like, what are you doing, guys? What are you doing? What happens if you lose your job? You've literally maxed to the max on this, and you have one stream of income. I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
If you're a doctor or something of that nature where you have a super safe career option or career line, I get it. But let's be honest. It's 2022, guys. Like, I mean, Apple, Google, Ford Motor just laid off 3,000 engineers. And this was a thing that 5 years ago, engineers were never going to get laid off again.
Yeah.
Right. Electrical engineers and mechanical engineers were being fought tooth and nail to go find those people.
Yeah.
And Ford Motor turns around and just lays off 3,000 a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
No one is safe.
By the way.
Yeah. Now, I'll make sure I'm stressing that. No one is safe employment-wise. If you're a young person on this call, my definition of young is anybody my age or younger. Somebody Austin's age or older, you may want to be a little careful on that because he's got some age on us. But our age or younger, you may want to go more into a wealth building. For people Austin and older, it's probably just too late.
It's too late, isn't it?
I had to find a way to get that in there, man. Sorry. Yeah. Austin is exactly 2 weeks older than I am.
Oh, man.
We'll not let him forget it.
But by the way, Amy, reach out. We can help.
Yeah, seriously, reach out.
Reach out. A bunch of info at you.
Yeah. And honestly, I love this line of thought. I love the way you're thinking. I love the way you're thinking about your family's future, and you're thinking about protecting them financially. You're thinking about building wealth for yourself and your kids, if you have kids or if you're going to have kids. I love this entire concept. And I want to be sure, because in a 1 hour Zoom, it's really hard to get all the information over, especially when there are so many different situations. So yes, I want to be sure that we're watching out for you and for your family's best interests as well. Oh, that's awesome. That has got to be a loud house. 3 boys.
Oh, jeez. Everything's broken.
Everything's broken all the time.
God.
Maybe
fun. Not. Maybe your boys are saints. I don't know. If it were my house, 3 boys. Yeah.
There it is. Total agreement on that one. Total agreement.
Yep, you hit it.
Yeah. So guys, and then before we jump off, because I know we're getting close to time, one thing I do want to put out there is, hey guys, it's Apple Week. We got the iPhone 14 coming out on September 7th.
Oh.
This is going to be, I think, a couple of different things. It's going to be an awesome phone, of course. It's going to have probably more memory. It's going to have a better screen. It's going to have a better
Yeah.
camera. It's going to have all of those wonderful things and doodads and gadgets that none of us on this call need. But one thing it is going to have that I'm watching to see is a price increase.
Yeah.
Because I believe that is going to be a referendum on where we're at in the state of economy when the new watch comes out, which is anticipated, the new AirPods come out, which is anticipated, and then the new phone comes out. I think they're all going to come with a 10 to 20% price increase, each one of them. It's not that the components themselves necessarily got more expensive or supply chains or all that stuff, because all that stuff we're getting back to normal on, let's just call it, as far as Apple's concerned, because they're very good at supply chain management, probably the best company in the world at it.
So good, man.
But I anticipate we're going to see $100 on the phone. If we see $200, that's a sign that I think Tim Cook is bullish on inflation continuing through next year. If we see $100, then I think he's like, okay, we're doing an inline price increase commensurate to the upgrade of the actual phone itself. That's my own personal opinion. But bear in mind, like the reason why Apple has made so much money is two reasons. One, Steve Jobs, the visionary, went out there and said, hey, we're not going to make a product and try to match to the world. We're going to try to figure out what the world actually needs, even if it doesn't exist, and make something amazing for it, right? Which they did with the Apple, and with the iPod, then the Apple phone, and now the computers and the tablets and all those things. But the second thing that Steve Jobs did was he got out of his own way in Apple II, and he went out into the world to hire the best of each respective thing that he could. The best user interface designer, right? Johnny Ive. But he also employed the best supply chain manager in the world at that time, Tim Cook, who used to work for Compaq and HP. And that supply chain management, that's where Apple's making its money. Those prices aren't that, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know. Admittedly, I don't know a lot about their business model.
It's really cool. It's actually a really cool story. Seeing Steve Jobs, I mean, not saying that getting kicked out is cool, but he got kicked out of his own company, right? For like 8 years. He was off in the wilderness working with, of all people, the Pixar guy, whose name I cannot remember.
Yeah.
And he raised his leadership lid during that time. So before then, Apple was a sheer force of Steve Jobs's will of existence. And he has a massive will of existence. We know this, right? And he's a massive genius, no doubt. But under it was another Steve, I can't remember his name, with Pixar, he learned like that guy, like Pixar had really created this amazing niche of animated films that were profitable second to none. And they were created by a guy that doesn't know how to make movies or know how to draw or know how to write. But he was very good at raising his leadership lid early on in his career and getting the best people in the industry onto his boat and rowing in the same direction towards the same vision. That's what his magic was. And that's what Steve Jobs learned when he was at Pixar. Yeah. So when he came back to Apple, the first thing he did was Apple had 106 products that were being sold at the time. He cut it down to 7. He said, forget it. We can only be good at a very, very small amount of things. And then he went out into the world and said, okay, what could we actually be good at? Well, we can't be great at the computer because somebody's doing it. We can't be great at a laptop because, Dell's already doing that. We can't be great at this. We can't be, you know what? We can do music. We can do portable music. That's what we can do. And
the music thing was a crazy play. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then next he said, you know what? We can be best at a phone. But then he went out and got the best people in their respective parts of the world onto his boat. Right? He got the best designers. He got the best engineers. He got the best technicians. He got them all onto the boat and said, okay, guys, we're going to change the world through portable music. Let's do this. Go, bro. Yeah. Steven, if you, and it's actually really interesting, guys. I would take the time to do it. But if you take the time to go back and watch old Steve Jobs videos, like pre-Apple II, before he had gotten kicked out the first time, and then after he came back the second time, he still has a level of arrogance to him. Absolutely. I mean, that's part of his own personal magic. But that is a very different Steve Jobs. It's a very different human between that came out 8 years before to 8 years later.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a great study in business. It's a great study in leadership. I hate to say it, probably a great study in parenting in a way.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good job today, man. Go be on vacation.
Job by you. Good job by you. Yeah. And we got a niece right here. And a sister.
Hey. Hi. So,
Yeah.
but he's going into like meltdown mode.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry.
All right, guys, we're gonna jump because he's going into meltdown mode. So I'm gonna
My
jump.
kids are melting down too, so I got to go. All right,
That's
buddy.
All right, get it, guys. Thanks for coming in this week. See you next month.